Barcelona, Spain, June 2013. The 23rd meeting of the European Neurological Society attracted 3,700 participants from all over the world. They discussed the latest scientific and therapeutic developments in this particularly future-oriented area of medicine.
The Barcelona meeting of this year had several highlights in terms of science and in terms of teaching contents. One of those has been the Presidential Symposium. For the first time in the history of our society, this was devoted to sleep and sleep disorders in neurology. This is a rapidly evolving field in medicine and in neurology, and sleep disorders are among those that account for the highest costs in Europe among the mental and neurological disorders. Certainly, Barcelona has been a very successful meeting, one of the top events in our history.
This highlight also marks a watershed in the organization's history. The Barcelona meeting was the last ENS Congress in this standalone format. That's reason enough for former presidents present at the meeting to come together once more, and for the organization to celebrate the important contribution they made to the successful development of the ENS. Let's look back at how it all began.
The ENS is a brainchild and the idea of Gérard Said, the professor of neurology in Paris. And it all started back in 1986, when Gérard Said invited a few neurologists, young neurologists of Europe, to join him in this idea. And the idea was really to make the ENS similar to the American Academy of Neurology. The American Academy of Neurology was a very successful society where many young European neurologists would go and to attend the meetings, and it was based on an individual membership, and it put a high emphasis on excellent science and also offered excellent teaching courses. And the idea of Professor Said was to do the same here in Europe at the time when there was only national neurological societies. So in 1986 we met frequently in Paris until eventually in 1988 the first ENS meeting took place in Nice. And this was a very successful event, attended by more than 1,000 neurologists from all over Europe.
Starting with the inaugural meeting, the ENS has run 22 successful congresses.
From the beginning, the founding board was aware of the fact that we should have one neurological society for European neurologists and not two. And at that time, the European Federation of Neurological Sciences had been founded, but unfortunately, we had a divided Europe with an Iron Curtain in between. So we found out that there was no way to come together at that time with the national societies. About 10 years later, at the time when I was the president, we tried again and negotiated with the then EFNS board about a merger. We got very far with this, but eventually there was some problem with the chemistry between the presidents, and so we had to stop these negotiations for another time. We were, of course, sure that sooner or later there should be only one neurological society in Europe.
But what did neurology look like at the time the ENS was founded?
In the mid-80s, it was a really exciting time. We, at that time, started to use the first MRI machines, and for the first time, we are able to see exactly what was the brain in a living human being. And you can imagine the excitation and also how large possibilities open in many directions. neurodegenerative disorders became visible in some way. And also this was really the prerequisite to start thinking about new therapies. By the way, at that time, the first patients with MS were injected with interferons, and think about how far we are today. We have 10 different treatments for multiple sclerosis. I think that the multiple sclerosis is a bit a paradigm of what happened in the last 20 years, and that technology, the advances in genetics were really fundamental, not only to understand better, but also to think about new treatments.
Since then, there has been rapid scientific and therapeutic development in the field of neurology.
After the foundation of the ENS, which is now almost 30 years ago, we have developed neurology into a very therapeutic discipline. In former times, we were mostly struck to get good diagnosis, but nowadays we are a very active discipline. That means we treat strokes, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's syndrome, headache, dizziness, and many others. Of course, there is still a lot of work to be done, for instance, in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, in dementia, and other features. But with the creation of the ENS, I think we have achieved several goals. First of all, we have combined many countries in Europe. We have brought many young people to neurology, and we meet once a year, and then we do collaborative studies. We have educational programs, and we have really excellent scientific programs. And because of this, I think we can transport the flavor of neurology, all the enthusiasm to the young people, and I think that's most important for our patients who deserve good neurological treatment.
In order to further develop European neurology in this spirit, future-oriented steps are needed.
5-6 years ago, we progressively realized that both European societies were doing the same work for European neurology with just different methods. And we began to collaborate first on the ENS examination, that is a European level examination for the end of the training of neurologists to get their certification as neurologists. And then we began to collaborate on the e-brain, that is a major e-learning system in which both societies made scenarios, questions, and so on. And slowly people realized that there was no space anymore for two societies, that we had to do it together. And the solution was that we should create a single society that would replace the two existing societies. For that reason, a task force including 3 members of the EFNS and 3 members for ENS, has been working very hard, referring to ENS and EFNS executive body at least twice a year, ended up with new bylaws and a new society that will be called the European Academy of Neurology, that will take over the job of both ENS and EFNS, and that will start next year. After the first and single ENS-EFNS common meeting in Istanbul, both societies will disappear and a new one will be launched.
Thus, European neurology moves well prepared into a future about which we can say one thing for sure. The importance of this medical speciality will continue to increase dramatically.
The creation of the new society meets 2 fundamental needs of modern neurology. The first one is to keep the different subdisciplines of neurology together. This tendency for fragmentation that we see in neurology and in medicine in general must be compensated. The second need is that of bringing the information of basic neurosciences into the clinical arena. This translational aspect is another goal that the new society wants to fulfill. I'm convinced that the European Academy of Neurology will represent a fundamental step in promoting excellence in neurology, not only in our continent, but worldwide.